Two games left to go. We're here to talk about it. Egypt pull away at the end, an additional added time, and Nigeria, dare I say, cruise over Mozambique. We're here to talk about it, things that we've noted, what this means for their next matchups, and then a quick preview of tomorrow's last games of the round 16. I got Mo Football here. Look, man, life happens. We just kind of come on, whoever can come on and comes in. It's been great having everyone here. For everyone who's been watching, I've appreciated having you guys here, but we're here to talk about it. Mo, how are you feeling this far into AFCON, especially after the games that we had today?
No, I just added Nigeria now to the contenders.
They, that did it for you, eh?
Yeah, I would say that so far they're the only team that have played a team they were supposed to beat comfortably and did so.
That's fair. That's fair. And that's a fair point, to be honest. They've performed against their competition as we would want top teams to compare them. So I can get that. That's fair. So again, in our results today, we had Egypt pulling away from Benin at the end 3-1, and then Nigeria 4-0 over Mozambique. I figured Stanley would have given up one goal somewhere. He did not. So the rare clean sheet for Super Eagles fans. It's out there. You got it. Uh if you look at the
Um,
games today, jump in before we set this up.
no, I was just gonna say if the only reason why he didn't get scored on is because they weren't too sloppy on their
Mm,
opportunities. That's why he didn't have much to do.
that's fair. A lot of the game, like I don't want to say that South Africa is Mozambique, and I'm not equating that, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of the ideas were there, but the players to execute it weren't there, and so you had moments where you're like, okay, they got it out wide, they're cruising, and they don't have the strength to get past the back line, or they don't have the. For South Africa, it was they didn't have the product in the final third. For Mozambique, it just I don't know if they had the talent to get past such a better physically imposing back line for that. What would you take for like since we're talking about Mozambique here, we might as well just go into that. What do you take if you're looking at this from a Mozambique perspective? And we'll throw up some of the stats here for those of you watching here. Like, what's the lesson you take away from that from Mozambique? Is it just simply find better players who can last, find maybe a solid midfielder who can break up some of the attacks? Is it find a striker who can put some of these chances away? Like, what's the big takeaway for a team like Mozambique?
I think you almost they got outclassed in every single position. So I think it was more of like the experience, expectations, and I think they were just outclassed all throughout the game.
Mm.
It was not just like, oh, their top player missed the mark or their top player was not there. It's just their top player did not even match the bench players from Nigeria.
It's a fair point. It's something we talked about on what it would have been Sunday or Saturday, one of the 2 days. I don't remember which day it was, but talk about the depth, right? You see the quality for Nigeria. Nigeria right now, I know Nelson brought up the point. Talent wise, they're one of the better teams in Africa, but the problem might be the goalkeeper, but then also between the ears for them. And this was a game where I think I could say they didn't perform well. Like they weren't no one they weren't perfect, but they weren't smooth. There were moments
Yeah.
like they weren't the best looking, but at the end of the half they were up 2-0. And so for
Yeah.
me, I mentioned on JD Wemax's stream here, who's in the chat. I do appreciate you stop by, but get some rest. We'll touch base again tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll touch base tomorrow. But yeah, Stanley was very bad. He was making choices, but for them, it's Nigeria. For me, it's just the scary thing for them is they didn't perform well and they still got the 4-0 victory. So if you're an optimist, you say they haven't played their best ball yet. If you're a pessimist, you say this might be the best it gets. Like depending how
Um,
you look at it from that standpoint, right? And I'm
yeah.
yeah.
I would say I don't think as a team it was, but I would say, man, um, man, the players that they expected to step up to the game to show
Yeah.
what they were capable of, they were pretty much the difference in, I think, the unallowed goal from Osimhen at like
Yeah.
what, 12 minutes.
Hmm.
I pretty much knew that it was going to be a long day for Mozambique altogether. Because if that goal would have gone in early, it would have been more than 4-0.
Oh, agreed. And they
So
probably bundled a few more opportunities where they could have gone up. Like this game could have easily been 5-6, dare I say 7-0 for them.
absolutely.
And that's just based how the game was flowing. But I think at the end of the day, a 4-0 is fair. I mean, the game shows it was dominant. It was dominant, but there's another word I'm looking for, but I can't find it. Like if you look at the stats here, it was dominant by Nigeria, but they weren't convincing, is what I was trying to get to. And so I think it's similar to how I felt about Nigeria, but less so last AFCON, where it was they were getting their 1-0 victories, and then you played them against South Africa, and you're like, a team that could actually finish might punish them, and then Cote d'Ivoire finally did. For Nigeria, I think it's the ideas that teams have against them are there. They're just more talented and more adept to take them away. Next round, when they play a team that has a little bit more attacking bite, we'll have to wait and see what that'll look like. But I mean, for them, I think this is a solid performance. They've looked the part against the teams, the up and coming, the emerging teams, as we'll say. They've looked the part against them, like you said. So they get their credit for how they've played. I still am nervous about them at goalkeeper. Right, Stanley to me feels like he's going to give you a goal at some point, and so it's up for Nigeria to say, can we get far enough ahead that it doesn't matter? In this game, he didn't give
He's,
up a goal, but
he's just a goalkeeper that like to give presents. That's all.
hey, I mean, maybe he's orthodox. Maybe Christmas is coming up for him. But like you never know. But that's the one worry I have because goalie aside, this team is talented. This team should be one of the better teams in Africa. And a performance like this helps in terms of okay, good. You'd like them to be more convincing, but they were dominant in what they did. For you, outside of the finishing for them, is there another worry you have for a team like Nigeria as they get ready for the quarterfinal round? Or is it just
Well,
simply getting
well, if
ready
their
and just
midfield is not able to, if their midfield is not able to play,
mm,
because I think they will be exposed if it's only Osimhen that has to happen. All right, so give me 1 second.
yeah, no problem, no problem. Midfield is a fair point to bring up. We did have the some stats here. Let me throw those back up for you in a minute here. But I think for Nigeria, the midfield's always going to be interesting. You want Iwobi to play better. You want Lookman to bury a few more chances or be the creator type in that situation. And in a game that is 4-0, again, like we said, they were dominant, but they weren't convincing in terms of how they put the game away early, which was good, but defensively they had to do a lot of work in a few moments. Not a lot of moments, but in a few moments. And so for me, the question is always going to be, can you get enough out of the Iwobis, the Ndidis, and the Onyekas in terms of adding in that secondary line, that secondary push for them? Because Lookman's always going to go up. The problem with Lookman is he's always going to kind of drift left, which means that's either Ndidi or Iwobi pushing into that space. And can they provide the stabilization, but also the attacking there to create more opportunities for themselves? If they can do that, life gets good and life is a little bit easier for them. Sammy Ajay,
Did
if they
Ayobi
could, yeah, jump in.
did, did Ayobi get like what, 3 assists technically, or 3 hockey assists?
I think Iwobi would have got three. Yeah, he would have had that. Let me throw that up one more time
Yeah,
here.
because I'm pretty sure for those 3 assists, or I guess how
He might have. Yeah, I had it here, but then it dropped. So let me get it back up here. All right, Alex Iwobi, what did you give me today? All right, so Alex Iwobi, looking at his stats here, he would have given us his passing was great today, shot dribbling accurate. He had two key passes going. So yeah, he would have had the two hockey assists there based off of what it looks like for the game that he played. And outside of the goal scorers, he is your best rated player on the pitch. So yeah, it will be is important. I think that's the player that you need to step into that space, especially if Lookman starts drifting either one way or the other, or if Lookman is just pushing through the middle and leaves that gap in between. It's Iwobi who needs to step up and take that on. I think he's capable of it. He's a good, solid player for that level. But the question is, can they then start to push that and create a little bit more in terms of consistency? Because that's a big question for Nigeria. It's consistency, right? This is probably their best run consistently since AFCON last year, since the end of World Cup qualifiers. And they've been a little bit they've been dominant in that, and they've been gradually more and more convincing. Again, I think at this AFCON, like we said earlier, this is one of the few sides that have beaten the competition that they've got to play and moved on. Tanzania, yes, they give up the goal, but then they get the goal right back. Against Tunisia, they kind of had that Nigeria game where they were solid, and then the 20 minutes of lull happens. And then when that 20 minutes is done, it's 3-1. Then it's about to be 3-2. And now you're asking yourself, oh, is this where it collapses? So for Nigeria, I think if you get another performance like that from Iwobi, you know Osman's gonna always gonna try to get those crosses. You know Lookman's gonna drive in one way. But if Iwobi can give you a performance like he gave you today, that bodes well for them going into the quarterfinals and those matchups. And I think that'll look good for them. So if they're able to do that, that would be the ideal. Because they have, if you aren't sure, as the round 16s are, starting on January 9th, which comes up sooner rather than later. They have the winner of Algeria versus DR Congo, and that's on the 10th. So that'll be a very, either one of those teams, I think, will challenge them on all three levels. I think for them, that'll be the key thing. If they can get some midfield presence more than just in the attacking third, but in that box to box space, if Iwobi can provide you that, they are sitting well. I'm still worried about Stanley. I will always worry about Stanley. But if they can provide that, I think that opens a door for them as they go. We did talk about Nigeria. They're going to play Algeria or DR Congo, but Egypt. Egypt was rather. There are moments in the Egypt game, Egypt versus Benin, where the thought was Egypt isn't serious, and then also followed by actually Egypt might. No, Egypt didn't do a lot in this win to convince me that they could win this tournament. Now, Benin again, solid defensively. I think I posted on Blue Ski or Blue Sky. It was one team going long ball and mid block versus the other team going long ball and mid block, but with more talent. And when Egypt finally scored, it seemed as if they were just the way they were defending, they were eager to give the goal back to Benin. And Benin scores on on an awkward cross slash shot that the goalie misjudges, makes a miraculous save on it, but then the rebound's put back in. Dosu in the 83rd after Atia in the 69th, Ibrahim in the 97th, and then Mo Salah in the 120th plus 4, sealing the game. To me, for Egypt, too many. Yassin Brahim is the player that is rated well. He scores the winning goal. But to me, the big question for Egypt, Trezeguet has to come out of the game as well, injured. But Omar Marmoush, you need more from that player. For playing 120 minutes, you need more from that player. And it's not just that you need more from the player, he needs to have more of an impact on the game, right? He did not cover himself in glory in this game. And that's fine. You're not going to have your best matchups all the time. You're not going to be on your game all the time. But you would like a player of that ilk, a player of that quality to have more of an imprint on the game. And in some moments, it looked like he was starting to build into it. But then in some moments, I think there are moments where you look at a player and you ask, from a fan standpoint, could you have run through that foul? Could you have maybe not play for the foul, but just play for the advantage and go through? And in some cases, the ref gave those opportunities. Ref didn't give those opportunities. But Omar Marmoush, I he's a player that we need more from. I feel like you need more from a player like that because if if you get more from that player, you get more opportunities. Like he has a shot in the 20th minute and then a shot in the 97th minute. Passing wise, not much, just moving around in his spaces. You want him to be more direct in that space. Dribbles unsuccessful at the front, but an successful one on the edge. And defensively, yes, he tracked back well. Again, this can tell you a snapshot of the game, but doesn't tell you the whole story. But I bring up the point to bring up this. He is probably the second most important player on the team, not named Mo Salah. I would argue he's the most important player because if he starts to ball out, there's not Mo Salah will always have the eyes, he'll have the attention, he'll have that gravity. But with the gravity that Mo Salah has, he should be, I won't say thriving, but he should have more of an imprint on the games. And so Marmoush is a player that not his best round of 16 game. He needs to have a better round of he needs to have a better quarterfinal matchup. And we'll see if they're able to do that when they play either Cote d'Ivoire or Burkina Faso. But Marmoush, didn't cover himself in glory in this game. Yes, Mo Salah misses a shot or has a poor shot at the end of regulation that could have won the game for Egypt, but he still seals the deal again with 1v1 versus the keeper. But Marmoush to me is a player you need more from, and especially with Mo where he is. And if Mo Salah is able to perform well, that gravity should give Marmoush more space to have more of an impact and an imprint on the game. Right. When we talk about a player like Omar Marmoush in the Egypt versus Benin game, I was a little bit disappointed in him because I feel like with Salah on one side, he should have had more of an imprint on the game. And it didn't feel like, not that he was poor, but he didn't cover himself in glory in this game. What do you take of Marmoush's performance versus Benin?
Uh, Based on what his caliber of play, I don't think I've been that impressed just yet. But I think, especially having Salah, for example, so that means he will have a lot more of the people pay attention to him.
Hmm.
So that should give him more freedom and more opportunity to kind of show that how we call it, the next player in range once Salah goes
Yeah.
to take the reins. I've not seen that performance just yet. Like Diaz kind
No.
of took when Hakimi was not playing, so Diaz is like, all right, I got this.
Yeah.
Egypt, so far they needed Salah to still do what Salah does to kind of cover the lack of playing from everyone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They can still can hide behind the prowess of Salah and Bono when uh, protecting them. So it's like, as you can see, we're only talking about Salah this, Salah that when it comes to
Hmm.
Egypt, and not really the Marmoush and Salah um, duo.
No, for sure. And like we said, with the gravity that Salah will have, you would hope that Marmoush would have a little bit more space to have more of an impact, more of an imprint on the game. That didn't happen as much. And so that's it's look, he has another opportunity to do it. Hopefully he can, because this Egypt side, look, especially with the injury to Trezeguet, like I think Ashore came on and had some nice ideas, but there were sometimes you could see he wasn't on the same page. He misses a chance at the end of additional time where that could have put him up 3-1, but then Salah scores a little bit after that and puts that away. But attacking wise, it's a nice game that it wasn't just we had to rely on Mo Salah to score all three goals, right? Atia gets a goal, Ibrahim gets a goal, and it's like okay, good. The it's a very uneducated statement to say they just rely on Salah to score for them. There's 10 other players on the pitch, right?
They
Those
hide.
players,
I think
yeah.
they more like hide behind.
And
Yes,
I can under
and I
yeah.
think most team does that. I think most of the teams I think that we call still relying on their big guys to do it. That's why we have not seen a player that have shined or have outplayed their skill level. uh, If you know what I mean by that. Like there's no players where we say, oh, he's a decent player, and then throughout these 4 games have said that playing lights out just yet. Silence.
No, I think it's a fair point. Sorry guys, we just had my internet just dropped. So now we back. But yeah, I wouldn't say that they hide per se against them, but I think there's definitely a player that will take those rods and take those arrows for the team. And I think because of that, it makes a little, maybe there's less pressure on them, but it's nice to continue to see again. Egypt are an 11-man squad and they have players all around, but we focus on Marmoush because the player of that ilk and that quality you would want to see more from them as they go through. But when you take a look at that as it goes through, I'm not sure if Mo's here, but we're just going to keep going and we'll figure that out as we go. But Egypt gets by Benin. Benin to me just looked like a team that ran out of gas. Once they got, there were even moments within the first 90, it just looked like they ran out, they were running on fumes before coach started to make some movements which opened the doorway for some possibilities. The goal was a goalie's nightmare. You know, you think you have it set and then it takes a different angle and now you're scrambling back. Goalie was prepping for the cross and then come in, gets it. But yeah, that for the 3-5-2, you need more in you need a cam role or a midfielder who's really gonna press and push forward. This Egypt side just feels sometimes like again, it's all for Mo or not. And until Marmoush can really Marmoush has to pick up because I don't think they can win AFCON without him. And so Marmoush needs to elevate his game a little bit more to give himself an opportunity and a chance because if they don't do that, I think maybe it's the quarterfinals is the ceiling for this team unless Marmoush is able to really push up and work a little bit more. But that'll be something we'll have to wait and see for. So we have Egypt getting past, Benin just ran out of gas to me. And we have our 2 out of our 4 quarterfinals matchups are set. You have Mali versus Senegal, that's on the 9th. You have Cameroon versus Morocco, also on the 9th. And then the next 2 winners for tomorrow, They have Benin, and then they Cote d'Ivoire or Burkina Faso gets Egypt, and then either Algeria or DRC get Nigeria. I am curious if you're still there. You may not be, and that's okay. But I think it does set up very interestingly in terms of what we could see coming through for the matchups. I think last AFCON we looked at it and we saw a lot of the emerging teams have nice runs, right? You saw Cabo Verde have a good deep run, Equatorial Guinea making it to that next round. You see a South Africa, and then South Africa isn't an emerging side, but South Africa isn't for the quote unquote for the unresearched. South Africa doesn't seem like a big side for football in Africa, but South Africa are. But you saw South Africa make a deep run. You saw DRC make a deep run. This feels more like the usual names that you'd see, right? You're looking at your quarterfinals: Cameroon, Morocco, typical names; Senegal, Mali, typical names; Egypt, either Cote d'Ivoire or Burkina Faso, typical names; then Algeria or DRC, typical names. For the unfamiliar, this is a standard AFCON, but this has been one of the few AFCONs where we actually see, for lack of better words, the big names performing accordingly or moving on accordingly. I don't think they've all been well. By actual role, I think Nigeria have been the most consistent side. And like we said earlier, they weren't convincing in their 4-0 win. They were dominant, don't get me wrong, but they weren't as convincing as they could have been. I didn't mean that they needed. I just There were just in different segments of the attack and build up, they just weren't convincing. And so this AFCON surprisingly is still wide open. I don't think there's one team that has clearly separated itself from the pack of teams that says this team feels like the favorite, right? With a team like Morocco, the crown of expectation, I think, will sit on them a little heavier, especially against Cameroon. I think Cameroon can walk into that game with not as much pressure as other sides. Senegal versus Mali. I think Senegal, they also might be that team that could sneak and then win it, even though it wouldn't be that much of a shock. I think a team like Senegal could win this competition moving. Nigeria versus either Algeria or DRC. Expectations, right? Nigeria right now doesn't have the build up for the World Cup. A lot will be said about these sides. I'm sure I'll be one of them who will look at how AFCON run and then will make assumptions based off of that on how they could do at the World Cup, whether that's fair or not. We People will make them, right? And like Cameroon and Nigeria aren't going to the World Cup, so they may be the teams playing the most freely with the least amount of pressure on them because hey, we don't also have to worry about the expectations at the world stage. We could just go win this, and then we can remind ourselves that at this level we are still dominant there. I said they were dominant. I said there were parts of their game. So the comment is we weren't convincing. Please tell me a team that has been convincing as us as this comment. I literally just said I think they've been the best performing team here. Based off that, I don't think that they have looked in terms of the. No one has looked, and maybe that's a better way to say it. And this is it's a fair point and critique to bring up. I don't think anyone has looked like the clear and out favorite in this, right? The closest thing we've had to that is Nigeria. And yeah, I appreciate the comment, United fan. There's no problem. There's nothing but love there. I don't think they have looked the most. That's why I said they've been the most dominant and the consistent there. But I don't think anyone has reached that level in terms of saying they are by clearly the best team. I think Nigeria have been that side. The one flaw I have with them is their goalkeeper. Um, People walked into this thinking it would be Morocco, but again, I like I said earlier, I think the crown of expectations for them is weighing on them a little bit. We'll see how they perform against a Cameroon in terms of what they're able to do in that matchup. Like I said previously, Cameroon and Nigeria, I think, are into this with the least amount of pressure on them in terms of there's no other conversation which we had just said about World Cup. I think they can win in this play and all the all the words that we'll have about them in terms of just all the dialogue that'll come after this AFCON based off of, okay, they did this at AFCON, which means then they'll either do great at the World Cup or not. They don't have that. They can just perform well, and then whoever wants to play them for friendlies in the March, they can do that, right? To your point, I do agree. No one has looked good. No one's looked as a clear team to beat. The closest thing to that, I think, based off all their performance, is Nigeria. The questions I have with them is goalkeeping, and I would have liked them to have put the game away earlier based off how Mozambique wasn't really bothering them. If you look at the stats of this game, it's all Nigeria. It was all green and white. Eagles were soaring, Eagles were picking, they were living their life. I would have liked to see them be more clinical in those spaces, because the one fear I have for Nigeria is there's always that stretch when you get to that second half. Now, to their credit, someone could argue that in the first half they weren't playing their best and they finished the half up 2-0. That's both scary or concerning. Scary in terms of when they reach their potential, how could be, or concerning that they're just going to kind of stay within that level. They're far too talented of a team to not consistently be putting away the teams that they're in front of them, and they're the only team that has done that. Right. So I hope that clears that up, United fan. I hope that clears that up for you. But again, but when we get to, like we said, those two teams, other than that, the other sides, like I said earlier, Egypt hasn't done anything really. Today didn't convince me more that Egypt has a chance to win this, unless Marmoush really picks up his game there. Senegal is on the other side of the bracket. How they deal with Mali, we'll talk about that. Once we get to the semis, yes, it's a little bit easier to talk about competition and just who they have to get through. You could have Senegal just creeping their way into the finals with one of the more talented squads versus either a Moroccan side who could get past Cameroon or a Cameroonian side who shocks people and gets by Morocco, or a Nigeria side who are finally playing consistently, or a DRC or an Algeria side who are trying to show that level of consistency as well. It'll be interesting to say, no doubt. I'm curious to see it. But again, when we get to the games coming tomorrow, I think once we have the quarterfinals set up, we see who's missing games for yellows. That'll make things a lot more clear. And we'll have some space in between to really breathe and digest and look at the matchups as they come through. But no, this is, as much as this AFCON has a lot of the big names here, it is very much wide open. And I think that makes it very intriguing and a very exciting tournament. I'm curious to see how it wraps up there. But as is always, I want to hear your thoughts. Some of you have put them in the chats. If you guys are watching this on a rewatch, feel free to put it in. Did you like the performances from Nigeria? Are you concerned about a team like Egypt's performance? When we look at the games for tomorrow, are you rooting for Algeria or DR Congo? Are you thinking it's Burkina Faso or Cote d'Ivoire? What are your predictions? What are the observations that you have seen? Let's put them in. Let's have this conversation. Let's dialogue. Let's figure this out. And we'll be right or we'll be wrong. And we'll go from there. So, guys, thank you for spending some time with us today. Again, a short episode today. Life comes at you fast. But as always, thank you for being here. If you haven't already, do hit the like on any of the lives you see here. Leave your comments. Who's looked good? Who do you think? And maybe that's what we'll do after the round 16s are complete. Talk about who the actual favorites are based off of how they performed and actually rank it from there and see how we go. But until then, guys, we'll wrap it up here. And I'm going to stop talking right now.